topic tonight is about what God has done, His creation for us. And let me get to my places and then start off with a question, as I like to do, and as it leads into what I want us to talk about. All right, let me get wired up here. All right, here's your question to begin with. Why does God want you to understand how you've been designed? We're all designed different, right? I mean, just look around this room, and we're all designed different. And every child, every human that comes into this world has a different design. And all of those designs are created, as we said a moment ago, as we'll see in just a minute, are created by God. The uniquenesses. So the question is, why does God want you to understand that? Why does He want you to understand that you're different and He's designed you different? Why does God want you to understand that? Somebody? Why do you think God wants you to understand the way He's designed you? Okay, so you can identify what how He wants to use you. All right, to help us understand we're made in His image. Okay, to know your value. All right. See, and by the way, this is important, a huge part of that, because the world values you different than God does. And listen, you can mess your head up if you try to determine your value the way the world does. Because you will never measure up to the world's standard. You'll never measure up there. Because just when you think you may be, making progress there, you're going to find somebody else that's a little sharper than you are. Right? Which is why Paul said, they that measure themselves among each other are not wise. You are unique. You're a unique individual by God. And you are valuable as a unique creation of God. What else do you think? Why does God want you to understand this? All right, it gives stability. It really does. It keeps you from trying to be something you can't be anyway. There's a lie in our culture that has percolated for decades, and it goes like this. You can be anything you want to be. Now that sounds good, and we all know that that's an attempt to encourage, right? The fact is, you can't be anything you want to be. I played basketball in high school and college, and I wanted to be Larry Bird or Magic Johnson. Well, here I am. I'm a preacher. Look, you can't be anything you want to be. But listen to this. You can be everything God designed you to be. And that's an important thing to leave. That way you don't go out and you don't have to compare yourself. You say, how has God created me? How has God designed me? And how does God want to use my uniquenesses for His glory? And see, the world says, okay, if you want to focus on your design, how do you maximize your design for your own glory? See, that's what the world does. This is, how do you maximize who you are for your own glory? But that's not what God does. God says, I've gifted you, you've got talents, but those are all given to you as a trust so that you can bring glory to me and so you can help accomplish the purposes of the kingdom of God. But our world makes it all about us, doesn't it? And you know what? It's hard to get past ourselves sometimes. Would you agree with that? I mean, the Bible says no man ever hated his own flesh. No man ever hated his own flesh, but loves and cherishes it. Literally, in the Greek, the idea is he hugs himself. Now, I've seen people about hug themselves to death, haven't you? But see, God puts the emphasis on, I've created you in a special way because I want to use you. So your life will have fulfillment and meaning. gifts of the Spirit, natural gifts and abilities. That when you, listen, think about this. Y'all understand spiritual gifts. I probably need to teach on that again sometime down. I do that every few years. I probably need to teach on that again sometime. But you have spiritual gifts you receive when you become a Christian. Okay? From God, special gifts. They're anointed kind of gifts that God gives you. But you were born with gifts. Did you know that even those, we say those are the result of common grace. That's how we talk about those gifts. Common grace. It means that in God's design, it's just there's some things that he does for humanity. And so he designs us all. But here's the deal. He gave you even your talents to be used for his glory. So here's what I've watched through the years as pastor. So what happens when you get saved, he redeems you, and thus he redeems those talents and abilities that he endowed you with from birth. And then when you take those and you intersect them with your spiritual gifts, and it is amazing as I've watched it through the years to see how God, the spiritual gifts he gives you, work so well with the natural gifts and abilities he has given you. He's smart. And he knows what he's doing with us, doesn't he? And so he wants us to understand our design. Well, let me jump in because I only got a few minutes here, and I want to get into some stuff. So if you recall, last week we started in Psalm 139, and we talked about, the very first thing we talked about is the intimate perception of God. This psalm right here is a psalm of David, and in this psalm, he's talking about the truths about God. He's reiterating who God is. So he's having this reiteration of the attributes of God as a means of honoring God, but also as a means of reminding himself and us of who God is and who we are to God. Now look at this. So, oh Lord, you have searched me. I'm in verse 1. You searched me and known me. You know when I sit down, when I rise up, you discern my thoughts from afar. And you search out my paths and my lying down. You're acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. He's confessing something. He's just simply saying, God, you are intimately involved in my life. You know my thoughts before I think them. You know my words before I speak them. And he says, your knowledge is just too great for me to comprehend. I can't comprehend that. There are times, okay, so somebody asked me a question. I don't know who it was recently. Pastor, I got a question for you. And they said, how do you answer that? I said, very simply. Deuteronomy says the secret things belong unto God. It was one of these questions that said, this is kind of mind-boggling. I said, it sure is. And he said, so what's the answer there? I said, the secret things belong unto God. That's what Deuteronomy says. The prophet said, as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. There are some things, we talked about this last week, but there are just some things that God knows that you and I, smart as you may feel like you are, you just can't comprehend. And in fact, God's not even going to try to give it to you because it's pointless. You couldn't understand it, right? And so, but he knows, and so the psalmist is saying, God, look, in verse 6, you know what he's saying? God, you're so smart. You're so smart. Why? God is intimately involved in our lives. His intimate perception, or the intimate perception of God is what the first thing he said. Now let's move on. I want to show you the second thing, all right? And that is, where shall I go from your spirit? This is the next verse. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. Isn't that a great statement? So you're in darkness and you can't see, but here's what he's saying. But the darkness is not darkness to you. And when I'm in those moments or seasons of darkness, God is still there. Because there is no such thing as darkness and God. God is the light. You know, by the way, let me just add something right here. Well, let me finish this statement. So, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. Now, euphemistically speaking, God would never walk in the room and if the lights were off and say, it's dark in here. If God walks in the room, the darkness vanishes. You've read Revelation 22 where it talks about heaven, you know, one day heaven, it tells us the things that we're going to see and the things that are going to be there. It describes heaven, you know. The one thing that is left out in heaven are the sun, the stars, and the moon. Now, we know those for what? Those are the natural light sources that God has put in this universe, right? But they're not going to be there in heaven. Do you know why? He is the light. The glory, listen, when you get to heaven, the glory of God illuminates heaven. Think about that. You just remember just a little glimpse of that when Moses came down off the hill. Remember he had to wear the veil over his face? You remember why? Because he hadn't seen the face of God. He had just seen God as he passes by. But the Shekinah, that is the brightness of God, the Shekinah glory of God, just the reflection of that was so powerful on Moses that if the children of Israel had looked at Moses, it would have either killed them or blinded them. And so he wore a veil so that light, the light of God, was dampened. Isn't that incredible? God is, he is the manifestation ultimately of light. And so in heaven, we're not going to say, somebody turn the lights on. This is a beautiful place, but we need to light it up. The glory of God will light the light. Doesn't that get you excited to think, well, can you walk in the glory of God? It will. So, okay. So what is this second thing? It is the imminent presence of God. You know what imminence means? It means nearby. The imminent presence of God. Here's what David is saying. It doesn't matter where I go. He is there. And some people say, well, is he talking about running from God? No, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the fact that wherever he is, even in places that in this world seem dark, he is there. And they are not dark to him. Have you ever walked through a dark room, and stubbed your toe? All the time? Well, stop it, Wayne. So, but have you ever done that? And have you ever done that in a room when somebody's sleeping and you didn't want to squeal? But you're hopping around and holding your foot or holding your toe or something like that. I don't know. You've probably done that at some point in time. The thing about this, God never walks into the room and stubs his toe. He doesn't walk in and say, I'm sorry, I couldn't see. The psalmist says, wherever I go, to the highest heights, to the lowest lows, if I go in the sea, you're there. Wherever I go, you are there. Listen, this is a statement of assurance for the believer. I will never leave you nor forsake you, the scripture says. That's a promise. I know, and we could talk, and we won't spend time there. We could talk about, so what about those times when you feel alone? Remember, it's you feeling alone, but it doesn't mean that God is not there. I did a sermon, I don't know, this is 15 years ago here, I guess, probably. I know you'll remember it. And the title of that message was, What is God saying when he's silent? Because God is speaking even when we perceive silence. What is God saying? What is the message of God to us? And so the psalmist says He's there. Even when we're in a season where we think, I think God is not there. I bet you've had some of those, haven't you? Bet you've had some time where you thought, God, are you hearing me? God, I'm crying out to you. There are reasons. Again, I don't have time to go into that. Maybe I ought to preach that sermon again sometime for us. The imminent presence of God. He is there. No matter where you go, He is there. In your crisis, He is there. When you think you're as far away as you can go, God is there. You can't get away from God if you're His child. The fact is, He'll chase you if you're not. But He's with you. Never forget that. Okay, let me move on this third thing. We got just a few minutes here. Verse 13, for you formed my inward part. This is my favorite part. Margaret, this is what I was talking about. This is my favorite part in this chapter. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame, listen to this, was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. Did you get that? That's before the womb, class. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. And then listen to this line. This is going to bless you right here. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. Listen, you don't arrive here and then God say, okay, we got to put together a strategic plan. God's plan, before you were formed in your mother's womb, God's plan. That's why you're here, because of His plan for you. What is this about? This is the incredible purpose. It's the incredible purpose of God. So before you were even crafted physically, you were crafted in the mind and the heart of God. And think about this. You already had an assignment. You already had an assignment. A lot of people think, well, I finally found out what it is that God wanted me. Well, you found out, but God was never, He was never puzzled about what it was. I know the plans that I have for you. Jeremiah 29. I know the plans that I have for you. So God created you because of this great purpose He has for your life. Your life matters. And that's why every life that comes into this world matters. So, with my two grandsons, I wrote them a letter. Each of them, I told you when they were born they could read. They're just special. And I don't know how I got two grandsons like that, but they're just special. And they could read from the day they got here. But seriously, I did. I wrote each of them a letter, a personal letter. And they don't have a clue what that letter says. They couldn't read it right now. But I gave it to their mother, and I said, you put this somewhere. I said, one day Pops is going to be gone. And there may be some time that they need this letter. And I said, but when they can understand and comprehend it, you either read it to them or let them read it. And the gist of the letter basically says some of these very things to them. You don't know how excited we are that you arrived. We've been looking for you. We were looking for you, is actually what I said. We were looking for you. And we began praying for you before you were ever born. And that's because God has a purpose for your life. You're not an accident. You were designed the way God intended for you to be. And He wants you to know how much He loves you. And maybe I'll be here the day when you read that. But if I'm not, I want you to know how much your pops and yaya love you. And how much your mom and dad love you. And how much we want you to know Jesus Christ. And how much we want you to find the meaning for your existence. And it can only be found. Don't listen to the world. I talk to them about that in the letter. Listen, That's true for all of us. That's true for all. Our fulfillment comes when we discover that God created me on purpose and with purpose. You know, that has been I've noticed in my ministry, God gives you a message that constantly comes through. And I've noticed through 47 years of ministry that seems to be the message that God has most pronounced in my life. Help people understand that He put them here on purpose. That none of us are an accident. I've talked to people and I've counseled people who said, well, my parents told me I was an accident. And I want to tell you something, it damages their heart. And I always say that's not true. That's not true. God intended for you to be here. They may not have wanted you to be born, but God did. And you're not a mistake or an accident. You are a carefully crafted design of God. And by the way, you ought to tell your kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, you ought to tell them that. God put you here. Look, I know we have plenty of kids that think they're special today. But I mean, help them understand the specialty that God has made them. So I did with my two grandsons just a few weeks ago. They were down here, and I did with them what I did with our own daughter when she was a little bitty thing, and she could we could communicate. And so I did this little thing. I used to do it with Karis, but I did it with my grandsons together. I said, hey guys, I said, y'all want to pretend for a minute? And so they said, yeah. I said, okay. Pretend we've lined all the little grandsons up in the world. All the little grandsons, every one of them, they're all lined up. Can y'all see them? And they're going, yeah. I said, and Pops could only pick two. I said, guess which two I would pick? And the littlest one said, you'd pick Bodie. I said, no. I said, I would pick you two. Out of all of them, I'd pick you two. The two of you. And so I want that message in their hearts, of their value and their importance. And I would do that with our daughter, Karis. I won't ever forget, I'm driving her to her little day school when she was their age, and I said, sweetheart, if I could line all the little girls up, all of them in the world, and I could only pick one, you know who I'd pick? She named her best friend. She said, you'd pick Sydney. I said, no, I'd pick you. You're the one I'd pick. And then we'd do this just about every time for weeks. If I could line them up. She finally got it. She said, you'd pick me, Daddy. I said, that's right, sweetie. I'd pick you. So one day we're driving in, and I did that with her, and she said, you'd pick me, Daddy. And I said, that's right. And then she said, just spontaneously, she went, Daddy, if I could line all the little daddies up in the world, you know which one I'd pick? I said, I hope it would be me. She said, yeah. I'm just saying, invest value in them, but let it be the value that God has placed upon them. They can't do everything, but they can do anything God has designed them to do. And you and I can help them do that. We can invest that in their heart. I'm going to stop there because our time's up. I've got one more thing to give you, and I really want to talk about it for a minute. So here's what I'm going to do. Y'all come back next week, all right? And I'm going to give you number 4, right? But we're going to go ahead and introduce